Welcome back to another Pilgrim's Progress. Christian has finished his journey now through the valley of humiliation and the valley of the shadow of death, and it's been a long, hard slog through those. And today there was a short hill that climbed up in front of him, and as he started to climb it, he recognized the voice he'd heard in the valley. It was Faithful, and he ran quickly up the hill to catch up with him. When he saw him, he said, "Hey, Faithful, wait up, wait for me." It was like Faithful hardly heard him. He said, "No, I can't look back and wait. The Avenger of Blood is after me." So Christian knew he had to catch up with Faithful, so he ran as fast as he could. In fact, he ran so fast he overtook Faithful. And as he looked back, he started to think good things about himself, like, "Oh, I'm faster, I'm better, I'm stronger." But soon as he did that, he missed the rock in front of him. He smashed his foot against it and went head over heels and clattered to the floor because he wasn't paying attention. And he fell so hard, all the breath got knocked out of him. But Faithful was coming up behind, and he reached out his hand and he helped Christian up. And they looked at each other and laughed and said, "I'm so glad to see you." Christian said, "You're one of my neighbours from the city of destruction." And Faithful was like, "Yeah, and I thought I'd catch up with you. As soon as you left the city, I wanted to come and join you. I thought I'd catch up with you, but you were going so quickly and so far ahead, I had to come all this way by myself." And they became great friends really quickly. They started talking. Christian started asking Faithful about his journey. "How long did you stay in the city of destruction?" Faithful said, "Till I couldn't stay any longer. There was all sorts of talking about the city burning with fire from heaven after you left. Everyone was talking about it." Christian said, "But didn't anyone else come out of the city with you?" Faithful looked sad. "Well, they were all talking about it, but no one really believed it." "What about Pliable?" Christian asked. Faithful said, "I'm sure he fell in that slough of despond because there was bits of mud on him, but he tried to shake it off whenever anyone brought it up with him. He said he didn't. He just said it was pointless following you on your journey. But the sad thing is now even people who liked him before don't like him. I think God has made him like a proverb. Like this, a dog has returned to its own vomit." It was horrible. Everyone hated him and he used to slink around in the shadows in the alleys. Christian said, "Didn't you chat to him and see him?" Faithful said, "Well, I met him once, but he wouldn't even look at me. He just walked by on the other side." Christian said, "Oh, it's so sad. Let's talk about something else. What else did you see on your journey? What other things did you come up against?" Faithful said, "Well, I escaped the Slough of Despond and got to the gate. I realised you'd fallen in. I saw the evidence you'd fallen in, but I managed to just find the path and I escaped. But then I met with this lady called Wanton." Christian said, "It's great you escaped from her. Joseph, she tried to get Joseph in our book. She got her hands on him and he just managed to escape. It's great you escaped her. What did she do?" Faithful said, "Well, she got hold of me. She had a flattering tongue. She pulled me close in and she promised me all sorts of good things, all sorts of pleasure, just to stay with her." Christian said, "Thank God you escaped." Oof, that was close. "How did you do it?" Faithful said, "Well, I had to shut my eyes and make an agreement with my eyes not to look at her, not to look at how beautiful and attractive she was. And I managed to remember an old saying which says, "Her feet go down to the grave." And I realized I was in danger, and I ran for my life. And I came to the bottom of the hill of difficulty. Christian said, "Oh yeah, I remember that. How did you do? What happened to you when you got there?" Faithful said, "Well, I met this really old man. He was so old. I think he was the oldest man I've ever seen. And he sort of questioned me, saying, 'You don't really want to climb to the top of that hill, do you? Where are you trying to get to?' And I told him, 'I'm a pilgrim going to the celestial city, and this is the way I must go.' He told me his name was Adam the First, this old man, and he lived in the town of Deceit. And if I stayed with him, he would give me some amazing work to do and pay me some amazing wages." Christian said, What did he promise you? What were they?" "Well, he promised me all sorts of fine things, all sorts of things that give pleasure. And in the end, my wages would be I would be his heir. I would inherit it all. I would live in the town of Deceit, and it would belong to me." And he convinced me that it was an amazing place. So I started to ask him, "Well, what about your servants? What about your family?" And he told me he had 3 daughters called Lust of the Flesh, Lust of the Eyes, and Pride of Life, and that I could marry them all if I wanted. Christian said, "So what happened?" Faithful said, "Well, I wanted to stay at first, if I'm honest. It seemed amazing, but the longer I talked with Adam, the more these words appeared on his forehead. And when I squinted and tried to read it, it said, 'Put off the old man and his ways.' I kept looking at those words, 'Put off the old man and his ways,' and I realized he would keep coming back and trying to keep me as his slave. And I had to say, 'I'm not going to be your slave.' And I had to run for my life because it was attractive. I ran away, ran up the hill of difficulty, slowly but as fast as I could." Christian said, "Well, did you see the arbor? Did you get to the window? I slept there." Faithful said, "No, I couldn't sleep, because as soon as I left Adam, there was this man who started chasing me. He was as fast as the wind, and I couldn't outrun him. He overtook me just as I got to that place where I should have been resting. He landed right in front of me, and he didn't say anything. He just smashed me in the face, knocked me flat on the floor like I was dead." Christian said, "Well, what did you do?" Faithful said, "Well," I said, "What did you do that for? Why did you smash me in the face?" And this man said, "Because you keep listening to that old man Adam, and you keep getting tempted by him." And then the man just punched him in the chest and knocked him back down on the floor. The Faithful said he kept doing it. I stood up and he just smashed me down. I stood up and he smashed me down. I thought that was going to be it, until another man came by and told him to stop, to leave me alone. I didn't recognize him at first, but then I saw he had holes in his hands and in his side, and I realized he is our Lord, and he rescued me, and I was free to go. Christian said, what about the valley of humility, the valley of the shadow of death? Did you meet anyone there? Faithful said, I met with someone called Discontent. He was all restless. He couldn't stand still, and he was like wounded, and I tried to help him, but it didn't look like he wanted to be helped. And he told me that I'd upset all my friends. My friend pride, my friend arrogance, my friend self-conceit and worldly glory. They were really upset with me since I started my journey following the Lord. He said, you are going to offend all of them. You better leave here and go back to the city of destruction. Christian said, well, how did you answer him? What did you say? Faithful said, I just told him, since I started my journey away from the city of destruction, yes, these friends used to have some claim on me. They used to be close to me. We used to walk side by side and we used to get on so well, but not anymore. I've changed now. They don't have any claim on me. They're not my friends anymore. And besides, they just left me. They deserted me as soon as I came out of the city and followed the Lord. And I got rid of discontent by saying, humility is the way to honour, not following pride, arrogance, self-conceit and worldly glory. It's humility. Christian said, did you meet anyone else? Yes. I met a man called Shame, although I don't think that should have been his name, really. Out of all the people I've met, I feel maybe he should have a name change. But he told me religion is a stupid thing. He tried to get me to feel ashamed of following the Lord. And he just went on and on and on, and he told me I was ignoring science, I was ignoring everyone else, it was pointless sitting in a sermon and wriggling and then going saying sorry. He really worked hard to get me to feel ashamed. Christian said, well, what did you do? Faithful said, well, at first I didn't know what to say, because he just kept going on, and I felt all the blood come up in my cheeks. My cheeks were burning like I was embarrassed of following the Lord of the Hill to the city, the celestial city. But I realised shame was only telling me about us, humans and stuff. He wasn't telling me anything about God or God's word. And I thought to myself, should I be ashamed of our Lord? I told him I shouldn't be ashamed of him. He loved us enough to give his life for us. But he went on and on and on. I love how John Bunyan says it. He was a bold villain, Shame was. And Faithful couldn't get rid of him. So Christian said, well, how did you do it in the end? Faithful said, well, he was just following me, kept making me feel ashamed. And in the end, I just turned around and I had to say, look, stop it. It is pointless telling me to feel ashamed of all the things I see the most glory and light and love in. Get lost. Go away. You're not going to convince me. I will not be ashamed. Christian said, we need to pray against shame. I don't think we've seen the last of him. We need to pray that the Lord of the Hill will help us. The Lord of the celestial city, the King, the one we follow, will help us to keep resisting him. And they agreed and they prayed together. And then they agreed as they went on their journey to spend their time talking about all the different things that would help them to follow the King. What will happen next time? You're going to have to tune in to find out. Well, we're going to go again back through today's story and see what Jesus wants us to learn. Some huge things for us to learn. And after we've been rescued from the valley of the shadow of death, after we pass through that, and sometimes after we pass through the valley of humiliation, there's still danger. Now, it's going to be really interesting to follow Christian and Faithful's journey. Faithful took exactly the same path. He went the same way as Christian did, met with the same obstacles and temptations, but it was all a bit different. So the things which tempted Christian didn't tempt Faithful, and the things which tempted Faithful didn't tempt Christian. They were all a bit different. And it shows us, first of all, as we follow Jesus in our church life together, that what tempts us might not be such a temptation to others. Where we struggle, others might not struggle, and where they struggle, we might not struggle. So that's what we're coming on to here, how we can help each other. And Faithful doesn't want to look back, and that's what Jesus says. Once we followed him, we shouldn't look back. We should just keep going forward. We forget what is behind, and we push on towards the goal ahead. That's Jesus. And Faithful's just carrying on. He's not going to wait. So Christian is like, but I need to be with him. So he runs to catch him up. And this is a great picture of church life. You see, Christian starts to run, so he starts to follow Jesus really carefully, and he picks up some speed. He's doing well in his Christian life, and he realizes he's doing a bit better than Faithful, but he looks back and he starts to get proud. He starts to think he's better than Faithful, but as soon as he does that, he trips and falls, and he needs Faithful's help to get him up. So it's a lovely picture of church life. A warning first that we shouldn't be looking down on our brothers and sisters in church. If we feel we're slightly ahead, watch out. What does the Bible say? Pride comes before a massive fall, and that's exactly what happened to Christian. What are we there for? Faithful shows us to help each other up, to build each other up. We're not made to be on our own as Christians. We're made to join a lovely church family, and there'll be other Christians there when you fall waiting to help you up, and when they fall you can help them up. Ecclesiastes says that 2 are better than 1, because when one falls down, the other is there to help them up. And Christian and Faithful go on the journey so happily together. You need, in your journey following Jesus, you need all the other church members around you that you can possibly have. And don't think you're better than them. You're following Jesus together, and he's given you each other to help each other. So this warns us, this next part, as Faithful starts to tell about his journey from the city of destruction. Some people believe that Jesus is coming back to judge the world. They say it, yeah, I guess that's true, an end of the world is coming, but they don't do anything about it. And Faithful tells that sad story, isn't it, that Christian starting to follow Jesus had a massive effect on people. For they were talking, but they didn't believe. And Pliable, who looked like he was going to follow, trusting in Jesus, he turned back, and it was worse for him. So 2 warnings for us, really. If you're not a Christian and you hear about Jesus and all the judgment to come, you need to do something about it. Don't just talk. Believe in Jesus. Start this journey like Faithful did. And don't give up following Jesus just because it gets a little bit difficult. It's terrible then. Pliable had a horrible, miserable life because he heard about Jesus and then turned back. And everyone in the Bible who did that, it was a horrible, miserable life. So believe and follow Jesus. See here, the Slough of Despond, Christian fell in, didn't he, straight away. But Faithful, it's not a problem. We have different strengths and weaknesses as Christians. Some of us are tempted by different things that others are not. But one place he did meet with that Christian didn't was wanton. And of course it's talking about Potiphar's wife, this temptation to please ourselves, and she grabs hold of Faithful. So remember that Faithful was tempted by something Christian wasn't, and he was tempted to be with her, tempted to spend time with her. She offered all sorts of pleasure, and there's warnings in the Bible about this, that folly, the woman folly, foolishness, temptation and lust, they all lead down to the grave. And Faithful remembered that from the Bible. So when you feel tempted, remember what Jesus says the consequences are. They're death and pain like an arrow in the liver. It's not worth it. Faithful managed to escape, and we can escape by putting Jesus' word into practice. And then he met Adam. this old man who sort of was very, very tempting. He was climbing up the hill of difficulty. So Christian met with formal and hypocrisy, remember, but Faithful doesn't. He meets with this old man who tempts him back, basically to another city, like back to the same life he was living before, just in a different place. And the Bible's full of that. Adam, our old self, even after we've trusted in Jesus, part of our old self stays in our heart and keeps tempting us back. And it is very tempting. You saw Faithful, he was tempted. But when he started to find out a bit more, Adam's children, what did he give birth to? Pride of life, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. He realised he was just going to become a slave. When he'd been set free, he didn't want to go back to being a slave. And that's the same. When you've trusted in Jesus, he sets you free. But your old self, your heart, your mind keep trying to drag you back in. And it seems attractive. It seems like it's going to be life. But it's not. It's just that same old slavery again. Maybe in a different way, in a different place. And remember the words Faithful saw tattooed? Put off the old man. That's what Jesus says. Take off that old way, get rid of it, and put Jesus on. True life and true freedom. And Faithful managed to escape again. Now, halfway up the hill of difficulty, that's where Christian got all sleepy. Remember, he started to, I suppose, get complacent. He started to think, I'm saved, Jesus has forgiven me, and he started to look at all the good things, and it made him just sit still and do nothing and get sleepy. And that was really sinful, wasn't it? Really bad when being saved makes us just sit back and do nothing. But Faithful couldn't do that because, and this is Moses. Moses, by the way, doesn't actually do this. He constantly says, trust in Jesus. The picture is the law that God gave through Moses is what smacks us down. Every time we start listening to our old self, it's like the law convicts us, isn't it? So where Jesus says don't lie or obey your parents, when you don't do these things, when you're tempted by your old self, by that old Adam, that old way in you, and then you read what Jesus says, don't lie, and you've lied, it's like it smacks you down. It's like it leaves you for dead. It can't bring life, but it does convict you, does tell you where you've gone wrong. And we do need to listen, but then of course the man that comes to help Faithful is Jesus himself. So the law is given to convict us of our sin, to make us feel bad about what we've done, so that we'll turn to Jesus and live. And when we believe in him, he comes, and the law has no more claim on us because Jesus has kept it, and he frees us and rescues us. Then discontent. This is another temptation that comes up. We can follow Jesus for a while, and then we can become all restless and discontented, and all these thoughts can come up making us feel like God isn't helping us, God isn't there. It would be better to be proud and arrogant and like self-content and go after the world again and like not be content with Jesus. How can we not be content with Jesus, who's loved us and given his life for us and died for us on the cross? Well, if we turn our eyes off of him onto other things, we can. So we need to stay content with Jesus. Realize how amazing, how lovely, how glorious Jesus is. And that's how Faithful dealt with him. It's better to stay humble and content and trust God than question him. And then shame. And like John Bunyan says, he's a bold villain. There'll always be these feelings of embarrassment and shame that others will try and put on you when you follow Jesus. Try and make you ashamed of him. Try and make you embarrassed about following him and being a Christian, saying church is pointless, Jesus is pointless, feeling bad about your sin is pointless, putting things right with others is pointless, and try and make you feel really embarrassed. And it will keep coming back. Faithful found that. The only way to deal with shame is just to see Jesus was not ashamed of you in your sin, to come and die for you and to call you his brother. Jesus is not ashamed of you. Even while you were still a sinner, Jesus died for you, and he loved you, and he hung there naked in the darkness on the cross, not ashamed of you, but loving you. So the way to get rid of that shame is to say, I see amazing glory in Jesus. And even though the world might be ashamed of him, I am not, and I never will be, because he loved me and gave himself for me. And Christian and Faithful carried on their journey talking about all the things that would help them follow Jesus. And that's what we're there for as a church family, to help each other to follow Jesus, to encourage each other, to build each other up, to correct each other. Look at how it helped both of them, Christian and Faithful. The same path, different trials, different temptations, but look how they're both built up from sharing their experience, and look how they're helped to follow Jesus. And now they travel together. Jesus has given you all the other people in church to help you on your journey of following him. So here's some Bible study. What can make us trip up? Why are other church members so important? Proverbs 16, Ecclesiastes 4. Proverbs 9. What does responding to the invite of wanton lead to? How can we escape? Will following Adam bring us life? What should we do instead? What's the answer to discontent and shame? Then you can add Faithful's route, so wanton, Moses, discontent and shame, to your map. And then think through in the Bible, who else met with all these trials that Faithful met with, and how did Jesus help them? See you next time.